anchor of NBC Nightly News. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. The participants tonight are Donald Trump and Hilary Clinton.
Oh, I didn't know that.
This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. The commission drafted tonight's format, and the rules have been agreed to by the campaigns.
All right, that's good.
The 90-minute debate is divided into 6 segments, each 15 minutes long. We'll explore 3 topic areas tonight: achieving prosperity, America's direction, and securing America. At the start of each segment, I will ask the same lead-off question to both candidates, and they will each have up to 2 minutes to respond. From that point until the end of the segment, we'll have an open discussion. The questions are mine and have not been shared with the commission or the campaigns. The audience here in the room has agreed to remain silent so that we can focus on what the candidates are saying.
All right.
We'll invite you to applaud, however,
will not remain
this
silent.
moment as we welcome the candidates. Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Hilary Clinton, and Republican nominee for...
Oh, by the way, just to let you guys know, in case you're worried that you don't know anything about politics, I actually don't know too much about politics either. I haven't been following a lot of their stuff, besides the crazy thing that goes on. The powerful handshake right there. Little, hey, oh, behind the shoulders. Yeah, I'm cool. I'm going to be popular. Hillary's trying to be, like, more sociable. And, so yeah, I don't know too much about them. This is the first political event that I'm actually observing, so...
Well, I don't expect us to cover all the issues of this campaign tonight, but I remind everyone there are 2 more presidential debates scheduled.
Ooh.
We are going to focus on many of the issues that voters tell us are most important.
If this is fun, we'll do 2 or 3 more of these.
I am honored to have this role, but this evening belongs to the candidates, and just as important to the American people. Candidates, we look forward to hearing you articulate your policies and your positions, as well as your visions and your values. So, let's begin.
Like when the stakes are high.
We're calling this opening segment Achieving Prosperity, and central to that is jobs. There are 2 economic realities in America today. There's been a record 6 straight years of job growth, and new census numbers show incomes have increased at a record rate after years of stagnation. However, income inequality remains significant, and nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you, Lester, and
she's going to talk about her dad,
Hofstra
I think,
for hosting us. The central question in this election is really what kind of country we want to be and what kind of future we'll build together.
A great one.
Today is my granddaughter's 2nd birthday, so I think about this a lot.
Yeah.
First, we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top.
By the way, notice that she talks about her granddaughter. She's talking about that relatedness. She wants people to connect with her emotion, like, oh, you care about your granddaughter, your people, everyone. And she's doing that social influence appeal and relatedness appeal.
Means we need new jobs, good jobs, with rising incomes. I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business. We also have to make the economy fairer. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work. I also want to see more companies do profit sharing. If you help create the profits, you should be able to share in them, not just the executives at the top. And I want us to do more to support people who are struggling to balance family and work. I've heard from so many of you about the difficult choices you face and the stresses that you're under.
Okay, so hold on. I just want to pause there. First of all, she was saying, I want to invest in you, right? There's that co-drive for ownership possession in place, but it's almost like saying, hey, if you vote for me, you're voting for yourself, right? You're investing in yourself. And then it's very smart that she just comes up with all these different sectors, and it seems like she's very knowledgeable, intelligent. She always does good on the core drive to development accomplishment, like she's a smart choice to vote for. But she's constantly going for, hey, we're gonna go for the popular mass market, right? We're going for the general public. And so she targets the minimum wage. She's like, hey, you know, Donald Trump is representing the top, and so we want to protect all the regular people because everyone has 1 vote, so we're going to target all of those people.
Let's have paid family leave, earned sick days, Let's be sure we have affordable child care and debt-free college. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by having...
Uh-oh. That's not a very positive thing.
The wealthy pay their fair share and close the corporate loopholes. Finally, we tonight are on the stage together, Donald Trump and I. Donald, it's good to be with you. We're going to have a debate.
Yeah, it's good to be with you too.
We are talking about the important issues facing our country. You have to judge us. Who can shoulder the immense, awesome responsibilities of the presidency?
Uh-oh, say shoulder's not good, because he has a white shoulder.
Who can put into action the plans that will make your life better? I hope that I will be able to earn your vote on November 8th.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, the same question to you. It's about putting more money into the pockets of American workers. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lester.
Get rid of the immigrants.
Our jobs are fleeing the country. They're going to Mexico. They're going to many other countries.
Tell Mexico,
you look at
Mexico
what China
stay in
is
Mexico.
doing to our country in terms of making our product. They're devaluing their currency, and there's nobody in our government to fight them. And we have a very good fight, and we have a winning fight, because they're using our country as a piggy bank to rebuild China. And many other countries are doing the same.
They are doing it. The Mexico's doing,
we're losing
using
our
us as a
good
piggy
jobs,
bank to
so
build
many
China.
of them. When you look at what's happening in Mexico, a friend of mine who builds plants said it's the 8th wonder of the world. They're building some of the biggest plants anywhere in the world, some of the most sophisticated, some of the best plants. With the United States, as he said, not so much. So Ford is leaving. You see that, their small car division leaving. Thousands of jobs, leaving Michigan, leaving Ohio. They're all leaving, and we can't allow it to happen anymore. As far as child care is concerned and so many other things, I think Hillary and I agree on that. We probably disagree a little bit as to numbers and amounts and what we're going to do, but perhaps we'll be talking about that later. But we have to stop our jobs from being stolen from us. We have to stop our companies from leaving the United States, and with it, firing all of their people. All you have to do is take a look at Carrier Air Conditioning in Indianapolis. They left, fired 1,400 people. They're going to Mexico. So many, hundreds and hundreds of companies
They're going to stop
are
that
doing
because
this.
it's just
We
talented
cannot
people willing
let
to
it
do
happen.
the same
Under
for less.
my plan, I'll be reducing taxes tremendously.
That's
from
good.
35% to 15% for
everyone wants
companies,
to-
small
that's
and
what
big
everyone
businesses.
wants to hear.
That's going to be a job creator like we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan. It's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. Companies will come, they will build, they will expand, new companies will start, and I look very, very much forward to doing it. We have to renegotiate our trade deals, and we have to stop these countries from stealing our companies and our jobs.
All right, just a quick thing. Hillary's been saying that she will actually increase the minimum wage and all that stuff, so more pay from the company to all their employees, which again, I'm not judging what's good, what's bad, but she's basically saying the executives will earn less. Donald Trump is saying, look, we're going to decrease taxes for these companies so these companies have more money and so they can bring in more jobs. Of course, almost inevitably, that will bring more money to the executives. So right, for this, company executives, like what Donald Trump is saying, probably they're not as enthusiastic about what Hillary's saying. Of course, most people are just stretched between their opinions on the personalities themselves. I think it's just very vague on how it's going to solve the problem because, yeah, the trade stuff, they can renegotiate. I think the issue is just how do you prevent people, workers from overseas to be less talented and needing less money? Because the economics work that way. As a businessman, he knows the economics works that way. And he has himself been moving all his businesses and factories in all these overseas countries. And what's going to stop that? Is he going to say, hey, you guys put a strong tax on us, right? So it's going to be 3 times more expensive for us to work with a Mexican person or a worker or an India worker or a Chinese worker. How is he going to stop that?
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond?
Well, I think that trade is an important issue. Of course, we are 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. And we need to have smart, fair trade deals. We also, though, need to have a tax system that rewards work and not just financial transactions. And the kind of plan that Donald has put forth would be trickle-down economics all over again. In fact, it would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percents of the people in this country than we've ever had. I call it trumped up trickle down, because that's exactly what it would be. That is not how we grow the economy. We just have a different view about what's best for growing the economy, how we make investments that will actually produce jobs and rising incomes.
I believe that's not
I
a
think
standard
we come at
literature
it from
these
somewhat
days.
different perspectives. I understand that. You know, Donald was very fortunate in his life, and that's all to his benefit. He started his business with $14 million borrowed from his father, and he really believes that the more you help wealthy people, the better off we'll be, and that everything will work out from there. I don't buy that. I have a different experience. My father was a small businessman. He worked really hard. He printed drapery fabrics on long tables where he pulled out those fabrics and he went down with a silk screen.
Just trying to
and
go with the
dumped them in
relatedness,
and
the
took
storytelling.
squeegee and kept going. And so what I believe is the more we can do for the middle class, the more we can invest in you, your education, your skills, your future, the better we will be off and the better we'll grow. That's the kind of economy I want us to see again.
Let me follow up with Mr. Trump if I can. You've talked about creating 25 million jobs, and you promised to bring back millions of jobs for Americans. How are you going to bring back the industries that have left this country for cheaper labor overseas? How specifically are you going to tell American manufacturers that you have to come back?
Well, for one thing, and before we start on that, my father gave me a very small loan in 1975, and I built it into a company that's worth many, many billions of dollars with some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that only because that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. Our country's in deep trouble. We don't know what we're doing when it comes to devaluations, and all of these countries all over the world, especially China, they're the best ever at it. What they're doing to us is a very, very sad thing. So we have to do that. We have to renegotiate our trade deals. And Lester, they're taking our jobs, they're giving incentives, they're doing things that, frankly, we don't do. Let me give you the example of Mexico. They have a VAT tax. We're in a different system. When we sell into Mexico, there's a tax. When they sell in automatic, 16% approximately. When they sell into us, there's no tax. It's a defective agreement. It's been defective for a long time, many years, but the politicians haven't done anything about it. Now, in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, yes, is that okay? Good. I want you to be very happy. It's very important to me. But in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, when she started talking about this, it was really very recently. She's been doing this for 30 years. And why hasn't she made the agreements better? The NAFTA agreement is defective just because of the tax and many other reasons, but just because of the fact.
Let me interrupt you, Simone.
I'm going to interrupt his interruption too. Just keep in mind, if you make these things, like if you tax things, imports from Mexico, then the buying power of each American decreases, right? Everything's going to be a lot more expensive. If you move the factories back to the U.S., the iPhones are made in the U.S., then suddenly everyone's going to be poorer because, you know, now before you can buy the same good for $3, now it's $8. So just keep this. It's a lot of that sounds really nice, like, oh, we need to take away those opportunities and those jobs, but at the end of the day, things get more expensive. But again, one of the key things here is that Donald Trump does appear more charismatic. Like Clinton feels like she is like, oh, I'm good at execution, I have my stuff figured out, but she's more like, hey, I'm personable. She needs more charisma. She needs more like, I am a leader of the country, as opposed to, I got these things figured out for you. Donald Trump has that, and that's a lot of power. Right? He does bring in a lot more of that epic media calling, making America great again.
Secretary Clinton and others, politicians, should have been doing this for years. Not right now because of the fact that we've created a movement. They should have been doing this for years. What's happened to our jobs and our country and our economy generally is, look, we owe $20 trillion.
Sorry, I thought there was an interruption. I guess he did not allow himself to be interrupted.
We cannot do it any longer, Lester.
Back to the question, though, how do you specifically bring back jobs? American manufacturers, how do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. I could name, there are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever.
For good reason.
And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
So I'm not an expert on all this stuff, but I know for sure presidents and politicians are connected to a lot of big companies, right? But I think it would only be a small percentage of the companies that are leaving the U.S. Right? I doubt if it's like tens, hundreds, thousands of companies leaving the U.S. Like all of them are owned by the president or the executives or the politicians, right? And a lot of them are just out there because of their own good and because of the policies. Again, all this stuff, a lot of it's about emotion, about feeling perception. And if you feel like, oh, they're corrupt, like everyone's leaving because of this candidate or the current government, then people believe in that. But I personally feel like that's unlikely. Again, I don't know the facts on this one.
Let me let Secretary Clinton get
Well,
there.
let's stop for a second and
All right, let's see what she'll
remember where
say.
we were.
Where were we?
8 years ago. We had the worst financial crisis, the Great Recession, the worst since the 1930s. That was in large part because of
Donald
tax
Trump.
policies that slashed taxes on the wealthy, failed to invest in the middle class, took their eyes off of Wall Street, and created a perfect storm. In fact, Donald was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis. He said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people.
That's called
9 million
business.
people lost their jobs. 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out.
No, but it's business, man. It's business. Make money.
Now, we have come back from that abyss, and it has not been easy. So we're now on the precipice of having a potentially much better economy, but the last thing we need to do is to go back to the policies that failed us in the first place. Independent experts have looked at what I've proposed and looked at what Donald's proposed, and basically they've said this, that if his tax plan, which would blow up the debt by over $5 trillion,
That's a lot.
and would in some instances disadvantage middle-class families compared to the wealthy, were to go into effect, we would lose 3.5 million jobs.
Keep in mind, if our debt goes up, that means China will probably own most of the debt anyway, and we're going to get even more owned than it is right now.
And maybe have another recession. They've looked at my plans and they've said, okay, if we can do this, and I intend to get it done, we will have 10 million more new jobs because we will be making investments where we can grow the economy. Take clean energy. Some country is going to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Science is real.
I do not say that.
And I think
I
it's
do not
important
say
that we grip this and
I bet there's
deal
footage
with
of him
it,
saying
both
that.
at home and abroad. And here's what we can do. We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of new economic activity. So I've tried to be very specific about what we can and should do, and I am determined that we're going to get the economy really moving again, building on the progress we've made over the last 8 years, but never going back to what got us in trouble in the first place.
Mr. Trump.
So I think one of the big things is that, again, she's still saying, she's replying to logic still, right? Say, hey, look, like experts out there have analyzed my stuff and it's better, creates jobs, analyze this stuff, not working so well, so I think it is strong, but she doesn't add that emotional power, like that emotional persuasive. It's so important, that charisma. And then of course I think bring up the clean energy, like those statements do help a lot. But I think it's funny because Donald Trump says so many things, and now he actually has to confront with the things he says, and so he might be put in a little bit weak spot when he actually has to confront with the sentences he made in the past, because he changes quite a bit.
She talks about solar panels. We invested in a solar company, our country. That was a disaster. They lost plenty of money on that one.
It's called Solyndra, I think.
I'm a great believer in all forms of energy. But we're putting a lot of people out of work.
And
Our
Enron.
energy policies are a disaster. Our country is losing so much in terms of energy, in terms of paying off our debt. You can't do what you're looking to do with 20 trillion in debt. The Obama administration, from the time they've come in, is over 230 years worth of debt, and he's topped it. He's doubled it in a course of almost 8 years, 7.5 years to be semi-exact. So I will tell you this, we have to do a much better job at keeping our jobs, and we have to do a much better job at giving companies incentive to build new companies or to expand, because they're not doing it. And all you have to do is look at Michigan and look at Ohio and look at all of these places where so many of their jobs and their companies are just leaving. They're gone. And Hillary, I just ask you this. You've been doing this.
Notice he doesn't say Secretary Clinton anymore. He just says Hillary.
For 30 years. Why are you just thinking about these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing it, and now you're just starting to think of solutions.
Well,
I will bring back jobs. You can't bring back jobs.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30
And
years.
I have, well, not quite that long. I think my husband did a pretty good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs,
He approved
a
NAFTA,
balanced budget,
which is the single
and
worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Manufacturing jobs went up also in the 1990s, if we're actually going to look at the facts. When I was in the Senate, I had a number of trade deals that came before me, and I held them all to the same test. Will they create jobs in America? Will they raise incomes in America? And are they good for our national security? Some of them I voted for. The biggest one,
Notice a good amount of that ties into the topic of tonight, right? National security, prosperity, and direction of the U.S. So that she just tied that back into the topic of tonight.
national one known as CAFTA, I voted against. And because I hold the same standards as I look at all of these trade deals. But let's not assume that trade is the only challenge we have in the economy. I think it is a part of it, and I've said what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a special prosecutor.
I don't think she should say, let's not say it's only this, right? I think she should have a stronger, bolder language like Mr. Trump claims this, but that is absolutely not true, right? It's ridiculous to think that way because there's so many other issues. I've been in office. I know there are so many possible. Just make it sound like Donald Trump is inexperienced. He doesn't know anything. He just looks at one thing, but he doesn't know. But he is not qualified to run this office, right? And so I think that's much better than saying, oh, let's not assume this.
We're going to enforce the trade deals we have, and we're going to hold people accountable. When I was Secretary of State, we actually increased American exports globally 30%. We increased them to China 50%. So I know how to really work to get new jobs and to get exports that help to create more new jobs.
Right, well, you haven't done it in 30 years or 26 years.
Well, I've been a senator.
You haven't done it.
And I have been a Secretary of State, and I have
done it. Your husband signed NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to the manufacturing industry.
That is your opinion.
You go to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Clinton, and you will see devastation where manufacturing is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor.
I'm sure there are worse somewhere.
Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that will be almost as bad as NAFTA. Nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That is just not accurate. I was against it once.
She's responding in a very weak tone, like just emotion, the feeling, perception-wise, she already almost lost. Like, we need to see how she recovers. Like, if she suddenly goes, like, becomes strong and gains strength and boom, answers that, that's great. But she's starting with a very weak format. We know from behavioral science that a lot of people, their opinions are formed in the first 1 to 3 seconds. So when we see that she's kind of sheepish, no matter what she says, I think a lot of people will have that opinion formed already.
was finally negotiated and the terms were laid out. I wrote about that in...
You called it the gold standard.
Well, I hope...
You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You
know
said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
And then you heard what I said about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Well, Donald, I know you live in your own reality, but that is not the facts. The facts are, I did say I hoped it would be a good deal, but when it was negotiated, which I was not responsible for, I concluded it wasn't. I wrote about that.
So is it President Obama's fault? Is it President Obama's fault?
Even announced. Look, there
Secretary,
are
is it President Obama's fault?
There are
because he's pushing it.
There are different views about what's good for our country, our economy, and our leadership in the world. And I think it's important to look at what we need to do to get the economy going again. That's why I said new jobs with rising incomes, investments, not in more tax cuts that would add $5 trillion to the debt.
But you have no plan.
Oh, I do.
Secretary, you have no plan.
See, this is the thing. Donald Trump is constantly exerting strength, power, right? Making one-liner bold statements. You don't know this. You have no plan. Is it Obama? And she's using many words to explain herself. And again, she's in a weak spot on that. And, you know, this is what a lot of lawyers do, right? They go into like, yes or no, when obviously the question is tricky in terms of just a yes or no. But when you can't answer yes or no, that feels like you don't know what you're talking about.
Book about it. It's called Stronger Together. You can pick it up tomorrow.
That's about all you
at the bookstore or at an airport near you.
We're going to move to...
But it's because I see this. We need to have strong growth, fair growth, sustained growth. We also have to look at how we help families balance the responsibilities at home and the responsibilities at business. So we have a very robust set of plans, and people who have looked at both of our plans have concluded that mine would create 10 million jobs and yours would lose us 3.5 million jobs and explode.
You are going to approve one of the biggest tax cuts in history. You are going to approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. You are going to drive business out. Your regulations are a disaster, and you're going to...
Look at his, like, body language. You are going to do this, right? Exerting power, and this is what works on TV. Remember, they said earlier, Kennedy knew how to do the television part. Like, that's what Donald Trump is doing. He knows how to do the dramatic, right? He's done that with Apprentice and all that stuff.
Increase regulations all over the place. And by the way, my tax cut is the biggest since Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of it. It will create tremendous numbers of new jobs. But regulations, you are going to regulate these businesses out of existence. When I go around, Lester, I tell you this, I've been all over. And when I go around, despite the tax cut, the things that business and people like the most is the fact that I'm cutting regulation. You have regulations on top of regulations, and new companies cannot form, and old companies are going out of business, and you want to increase the regulations and make them even worse. I'm going to cut regulations, but I'm going to cut taxes big league, and you're going to raise taxes big league. End of story.
Let me get you to...
That smirky laugh is actually a positive thing. Because that smirky laugh is like, you're like a child. What you're saying makes no sense. It's stupid. It's obviously dumb. And actually, if she could just answer him with that smile, with like a 2 to 3 liner, and just seal it, that would work really well. Like, actually, you say this, but no, it's that. Actually, you said this, look it up, it's this, blah, 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 and then done. That would actually work.
Right there, because we're going to move into the next segment. We're going to talk taxes.
That can't be left
to stand.
Take 30
seconds.
I kind of assumed that there would be a lot of these charges and claims. And so we have taken the homepage of my website, HillaryClinton.com, and we've turned it into a fact checker. So if you want to see in real time what the facts are, please go and take a look.
And take a look at mine also, and you'll see.
Not add a penny to the debt. And your plans would add $5 trillion to the debt. What I have proposed would cut regulations and streamline them for small businesses. What I have proposed would be paid for by raising taxes on the wealthy because they have made all the gains in the economy. And I think it's time that the wealthy and corporations paid their fair share to support this.
Well, you just opened the next segment.
Okay, this is actually a good comeback. This is a good response. I think at the beginning she was a little weak. Oh, if you go to my website, I think the way it started was, in terms of the tone, it's weak. I think it's great that she's, I'm confident. Go to the site, check the details. There's an action item, which is always nice. And some people are lazy to check, but just saying go to it and check, people feel like, oh, that's confident, right? But I think the big thing is going back to her strong point, the emotion, like, hey, actually, whatever you say, it's against the rich people like you. Like, not the regular voters. It's rich people get penalized, the rich people's money, and go to the poor people's money. She has to go back to her core aggressive statement, her core offensive arsenal, as opposed to just being like explain defensive.
Well, look, can I just finish? I think I should.
I'm going to give you
go to her
the right here.
website and you take a look at her
minutes.
website.
This is like
She's
kind of
going to
funny.
raise taxes
Got it on, yeah.
$1.3 trillion.
Mr. Trump,
And look at her website. You know what? It's no different than this. She's telling us how to fight ISIS. Just go to her website. She tells you how to fight ISIS on her website. I don't think General Douglas MacArthur would like that too much.
The next segment, we're continuing
Well,
the
at
subject
least
of
I have a plan to fight ISIS.
No, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do.
No, we're not.
See, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do. No wonder you've been fighting. No wonder you've been fighting ISIS your entire adult life.
Folks,
That's go to the fact checkers, get to work.
You are unpacking a lot here, and we're still in the issue of achieving prosperity. And I want to talk about taxes. The fundamental difference between the two of you concerns the wealthy. Secretary Clinton, you're calling for a tax increase in the wealthiest Americans. I'd like you to further defend that.
That might be bad for me, by the way, but that's okay.
For the wealthy.
I'm not even
I'd like you to
bragging,
defend that. And
I'm just saying.
Next 2-minute answer goes to you, Mr.
I'm just
Well,
saying.
I'm really calling for major jobs because the wealthy are going to create tremendous
That I'm not biased
jobs.
either
They're going
way,
to
I guess.
expand their companies. They're going to do a tremendous job. I'm getting rid of the carried interest provision, and if you really look, it's not a tax. It's really not a great thing for the wealthy. It's a great thing for middle class. It's a great thing for companies to expand. And when these people are going to put billions and billions of dollars into companies, and when they're going to bring $2.5 trillion back from overseas, where they can't bring the money back because politicians like Secretary Clinton won't allow them to bring the money back because the taxes are so onerous and the bureaucratic red tape. So what is so bad? So what they're doing is they're leaving our country. And they're, believe it or not, leaving because taxes are too high and because some of them have lots of money outside of our country. And instead of bringing it back and putting the money to work because they can't work out a deal to, and everybody agrees it should be brought back, instead of that, they're leaving our country to get their money because they can't bring their money back into our country because of bureaucratic red tape, because they can't get together, because we have a president that can't sit them around the table and get them to approve something. And here's the thing. Republicans and Democrats agree that this should be done. $2.5 trillion. I happen to think it's double that. It's probably $5 trillion that we can't bring into our country, Lester. And with a little leadership, you'd get it in here very quickly, and it could be put to use on the inner cities and lots of other things, and it would be beautiful. But we have no leadership. And honestly, that starts with Secretary Clinton.
So I think his statement there is kind of weak. It goes into that explaining weak kind of statements. I think he actually, if he could make a much stronger point by just summoning it down to say like, hey, when you are taxing the rich, the companies, that's why they're moving overseas, right? Because they get more tax in the U.S. and they move overseas, then bring everyone else overseas. They're leaving there since they want to come back. Very straightforward. Right? I think he said a lot of things, and the red tape, bureaucracy, politics. He didn't add as much emotional energy to it either. He's like, again, just like, oh, all this stuff that you already know. He's not making people angry or frustrated about the status quo. But then he always brings it back into, because there is no leadership, right? And I think it appeals to a lot of his audience because his audience is like, oh, blah, 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 politics, bureaucracy, whatever, I don't care. And then when he says, there is no leadership, like, yeah, we want leadership, right? And so that ending, like, random motivational statement is just really important, and especially in his campaign. Hillary could use some of that, actually.
All right, you have 2 minutes on the same question to defend tax increases on the wealthiest Americans, Secretary Clinton.
I have a feeling that by the end of this evening, I'm going to be blamed for everything that's ever happened.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, why not? Just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say,
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. We've looked at your tax proposals. I don't see changes in the corporate tax rates or the kinds of proposals you're referring to that would cause the repatriation, bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. I happen to support that. I happen to support that in a way that will actually work to our benefit. But when I look at what you have proposed, you have what is called now the Trump loophole.
She should really say we have hundreds or dozens of experts, top leading experts from great universities that go through all your files. Everything, we've read everything, we study everything carefully, and it does not say it. Because now she's like, oh, you know, I didn't see it. And Donald Trump could easily just say, well, you didn't look fast enough, you're just lazy, right? So she needs to add credibility to something like that.
Because it would so advantage you and the business you do. You've proposed an approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for your family. And when you look at what you are proposing, it is, as I said, trumped up trickle down. Trickle down did not work. It got us into the mess we were in 2008 and 9. Slashing taxes on the wealthy hasn't worked. And a lot of really smart, wealthy people know that. And they are saying, hey, we need to do more to make the contributions we should be making to rebuild the middle class. I don't think top-down works in America. I think building the middle class, investing in the middle class, making college debt-free so more young people can get their education, helping people refinance their debt from college at a lower rate. Those are the kinds of things that will really boost the economy. Broad-based, inclusive growth is what we need in America, not more advantages for people at the very top.
That's all good statements. Again, back to issues people can relate to. Oh, for my paying for my college tuition, my children's college tuition. Again, back to that's just issues at home. People stress about on a more day-to-day basis, as opposed to, oh, rich people can't get their money back in. So that's actually a really strong direction that she brought it into. And she says, oh, all your policy make your family rich.
Mr. Trump,
typical politician, all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work, never going to happen. Our country is suffering because people like Secretary Clinton have made such bad decisions in terms of our jobs and in terms of what's going on. Now, look, we have...
Donald Trump is really good at this. This actually works. It's very sad that it's just like, they say stuff and it's like, oh, see, people like this big stereotype that sucks, they're still sucking, you don't have to listen to them, right? And it may or may not be true, but that's just a strong statement saying, whatever you said sounds so good and I have no answer to it potentially, but either way, you're discredited because you're a politician, right? And if he says it with more strength and power, like emotional persuasiveness, he actually could sway some opinions based on that.
The worst revival of an economy since the Great Depression. And believe me,
the greatest revival,
right
the
now.
worst revival.
And the only thing that looked good is the stock market. But if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down. We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble. And we better be awfully careful. And we have a Fed that's doing political things. This Janet Yellen of the Fed. The Fed is doing political by keeping the interest rates at this level.
It looks fed up.
And believe me, the day Obama goes off and he leaves and he goes out to the golf course for the rest of his life to play golf, when they raise interest rates, you're going to see some very bad things happen because the Fed is not doing their job. The Fed is being more political than Secretary Clinton.
Mr. Trump, we're talking about the burden that Americans have to pay.
Wait, is that an insult to the Fed or the Secretary Clinton? Very, very confusing on that one.
Yet you have not released your tax returns. And the reason nominees have released their returns for decades is that voters will know if their potential president owes money to, who owes it to, and any business conflicts. Don't Americans have a right to know if there are any conflicts of interest?
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released. But you will learn more about Donald Trump by going down to the federal elections, where I filed a 104-page, essentially financial statement of sorts, the forms that they have. It shows income. In fact, the income, I just looked today, the income is filed at $694 million for this past year. $694 million. If you would have told me I was going to make that 15 or 20 years ago, I would have been very surprised. But that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. When we have a country that's doing so badly, that's being ripped off by every single country in the world, it's the kind of thinking that our country needs, because everybody, Lester, we have a trade deficit with all of the countries that we do business with of almost $800 billion a year. You know what that is? That means who's negotiating these trade deals?
Like
we have people,
a lot of money,
political hacks negotiating our trade deals.
The IRS has
Oh, actually, okay, so his response was pretty smart in my opinion, because the guy just says, why don't you release your stuff? So first off, he says, oh, I will some point in the future. And first of all, we don't know if he will or not, which is it's fine. But the key is that he wants to sway people's emotional opinion for long enough that when they decided on it, it doesn't matter that detail anymore. Actually, there was this really funny TV show, what is it called? Mama's Boy. It's basically matching three guys with lots of girls, those reality shows. This is one of the very few reality shows I've watched. Oh, but the thing is that three guys, their moms are there too, and their moms will help them decide. And there's this girl who used to be a penthouse pet, which means she does soft porn. But then she's like, oh, I'm like this next door girl, whatnot. And the mom really, really, really liked her until like 5, 6, 7 episodes down. Like because his mom's influence, he starts to like her too, and then she reveals that, right? Like I do soft porn, and he's like, oh, that's really, really bad. And then he tells his mom, because his mom's like, oh, all these other big boob blonde girls, you know, they're so flirtatious, they're not for my son, right? But that nice little next door girl, she's for my son. And then she realized, oh, she did this penthouse pet thing, and she's like, oh, if I knew that from the beginning, I would say no, no, no. But I have come to her, know her personality. I like her. She's just such a sweet girl. I think she's for my son. That's what Donald Trump is doing. He's like, I do soft porn, but I'm not gonna tell you guys yet. I want you guys to be pursued by everything else, and then I'll tell you this stuff. And again, a lot of the data just says that he's not paying any tax at all, which is an issue. But again, I'm not an expert, and I don't know what's the fact. I read some articles saying the last time he filed taxes, he paid $0 in taxes, and with all his mingling, his ways to do it. But again, he's smart. First of all, he says, I will do it. I'm not afraid of doing it. I will do it, but I'll do it later. Second of all, I have stuff on my website. Same thing what Hilary did, right? Hey, go check it. I'm not afraid if you check it. Who knows what it says, right? And then he says, it says I made a lot of money, right? He's not saying about the taxes. I made a lot of money. And then he brings it back to his emotional point, I can make America great again. I made so much money for myself, 20 years ago, I would not have believed in it, and that I was so great, I was so amazing, and so now, today, you guys don't believe in me, but I can make America, I can make America's, $16 million into billions of dollars. So I think his strategy in this persuasion is actually pretty sound.
Audit of your taxes, you're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal?
Well, I told you, I will release them as soon as the audit. Look, I've been under audit almost for 15 years. I know a lot of wealthy people that have never been audited. I said, you get audited? I get audited almost every year. And in a way, I should be complaining. I'm not even complaining. I don't mind it. It's almost become a way of life. I get audited by the IRS, but other people don't. I will say this: we have a situation.
The IRS realize there's something
has to be
to audit.
Care of. I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes. When she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted, as soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns, and that's against my lawyers. They say don't do it. I will tell you this: no. In fact, watching shows, reading the papers, almost every lawyer says you don't release your returns until the audit's complete. When the audit's complete, I'll do it. But I would go against them if she releases her.
So it's negotiable?
This is really good, right? Because Hillary Clinton, she had a scandal about deleted emails, stuff like that. Again, I just read some headliners and stuff, but he's like, well, if I'm not releasing this, but she has this huge thing, and once she does this, I will do it. So now it's like, I'm not at fault if I don't release it, right? It's her fault. She refuses to do it, so therefore I can't do anything. So it puts on her, and it's probably something that's going to be really difficult for Hillary Clinton to release. Now, she does have that relatively confident smile right now, if you look at her, which is a good thing. It's positive. And we'll see how she comes back from that.
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000?
Well, I'll let her ask that, but let me just admonish the audience one more time. There was an agreement. We did ask you to be silent, so it would be helpful for us. Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think you've just seen another example of bait and switch here. For 40 years, everyone running for president has released their tax returns. You can go and see nearly...
She's bringing the topic back. She's evading that topic too, it seems like.
39, 40 years of our tax returns, but everyone has done it. We know the IRS has made clear there is no prohibition on releasing it when you're under audit. So you've got to ask yourself, why won't he release his tax returns? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means...
That's funny. He jumps like, but that's a good thing, right? And again, it's like, sometimes he'll say that, well, look, I know all the loopholes, so I can cover them up, right? But like the average American's like, well, I pay, I make $30,000 a year, and I pay, thousands of maybe $10,000 worth of taxes, and I'd assume Donald Trump doesn't pay a lot, but at least more than me, right? And so it's a big thing when they think Donald Trump pays lower than the average American.
Zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are, because it must be something really important, even terrible, that he's trying to hide. And the financial disclosure statement, they don't give you the tax rate. They don't give you all the details that tax returns would. And it just seems to me that this is something that the American people deserve to see. And I have no reason to believe that he's ever going to release his tax returns, because there's something he's hiding. And we'll guess. We'll keep guessing at what it might be that he's hiding. But I think the question is, were he ever to get near the White House, what would be those conflicts? Who does he owe money to? Well, he owes you the answers to that, and he should provide them.
So that's actually a really strong response, right? We just talked about that. It's very strong. It's good that she says nothing about those letters, because that's her weak point. That's a scandal. By explaining that, by saying anything around that, it just hurts her, digs a deeper hole. So she just turns it around and she plants the seed of doubt. Like, we don't know. Could be all these bad things. We can just keep guessing, right? There's even a desire to action that's planted there. Like, you can, after the debate, still think about it. Raise that doubt in your head. Donald Trump, at this point, he doesn't have the luxury of pausing and like play by play and analyze it. But at this point, I think he should, I think it's like, oh, that's a smart thing, whatever. But I think he should go back to that and say, hey, look, you're saying that I have something to hide, I'm not releasing. What about those 30,000 emails? What do you have to hide? You have way more. At least you already laid out 3 or 4 things that potentially that I'm hiding, which you'll see completely that's not true. Your 40,000 emails, we have no idea what you would be hiding, right? Any type of malicious activity, why would you withhold that from the American citizens? Like, are you even who are you working with? What are you doing? Are you harming people? Why? When you hide them, we can only guess. What are you doing? I think that will be a very strong statement.
So he also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do.
And it got brought back to her. Lester would have let it go.
made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently. But I'm not going to make any excuses. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for that.
Mr. Trump?
Super. I guess that was clever too. Hey, I made a mistake. I'm accountable. I'll take responsibility. Brush it off. Just say, yeah, it was sucks. It's bad. I did something bad, and I will be responsible, right? What, like, how are you going to be responsible? Are you going to reveal what you said? Are you going to lose your election? What does it mean that you're going to be responsible?
That was more than a mistake. That was done purposely. Okay, that was not a mistake. That was done purposely. When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth, so they're not prosecuted. When you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful. And believe me, this country thinks it's disgraceful. It really thinks it's disgraceful also. As far as my tax returns, you don't learn that much from tax returns, that I can tell you. You learn a lot from financial disclosure. And you should go down and take a look at that. The other thing, I'm extremely underleveraged. The report that said 650, which, by the way, a lot of friends of mine that know my business said, boy, that's really not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money relative to what I had. The buildings that were in question, they said in the same report, which was, actually wasn't even a bad story, to be honest with you, but the buildings are worth $3.9 billion. And the 650 isn't even on that, but it's not 650, it's much less than that. But I could give you a list of banks. I would, if that would help you, I would give you a list of banks. These are very fine institutions, very fine banks. I could do that very quickly. I am very underleveraged. I have a great company. I have a tremendous income. And the reason I say that is not in a brag.
You know what's funny? 650 million. That's not a lot of it. That's like nothing. It's like nothing. And I have a tremendous income. What was his income, he said? Oh, it's about $600 million. So it's like, so is it a lot or not? $600 million. Is that a lot to you or is it not a lot for you?
Docious way, it's because it's about time that this country had somebody running it that has an idea about money. Where we have
back to emotional
$20 trillion
statements.
in debt, and our country's a mess. You know, it's one thing to have 20 trillion in debt, and our roads are good, and our bridges are good, and everything's in great shape. Our airports are like from a third world country. You land at LaGuardia, you land at Kennedy, you land at LAX, you land at Newark, and you come in from Dubai and Qatar, and you see these incredible, you come in from China, you see these incredible airports, and you land, we've become a third world country. So, the worst of all things that's happened, we owe $20 trillion, and we're a mess. We haven't even started. And we've spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, according to a report that I just saw, whether it's 6 or 5, but it looks like it's 6. $6 trillion in the Middle East. We could have rebuilt our country twice. And it's really a shame. And it's politicians like Secretary Clinton that have caused this problem.
I don't know if we can rebuild the whole country because his building, he just said, is $3 billion. So like how many, that's just like a few thousand of these buildings, right? I think.
Country has tremendous problems. We're a debtor nation, we're a serious debtor nation, and we have a country that needs new roads, new tunnels, new bridges, new airports, new schools, new hospitals. And we don't have the money because it's been squandered on so many of your ideas.
Let you
And
respond
maybe
and we'll move to our
because
next.
you haven't paid any federal income tax for a lot of years. And the other thing I think is important
It would
to
be
point out
squandered too,
is
believe me.
If your main claim to be president of the United States is your business, then I think we should talk about that. You know, your campaign manager said that you built a lot of businesses on the backs of little guys. And indeed, I have met a lot of the people who were stiffed by you and your businesses, Donald. I've met dishwashers, painters, architects, glass installers, marble installers, drapery installers, like my dad was, who you...
Doing that personal relatedness story again and bringing it back to, hey, the average people, well, that's who I want to protect, right? That's, again, her aggressive arsenal, and she wants to go back to that. It's a good thing.
You refused to pay when they finished the work that you asked them to do. We have an architect in the audience who designed one of your clubhouses at one of your golf courses. It's a beautiful facility. It immediately was put to use. and you wouldn't pay what the man needed to be paid, what he was charging.
Maybe he didn't do a good job, and I was unsatisfied with his work, which our country should do too.
The thousands of people that you have stiffed over the course of your business not deserve.
You know, it's an amazing thing when she can say someone in the audience is in that situation right there. Right now, it's not a concrete concept. It's like that one guy. It's like Joe the plumber. And then Donald Trump actually comes in a weak turn. He's like, maybe you didn't do a good job. Like he's explaining. He's like, oh, maybe this, maybe that. And again, she's on the upper hand right now with that.
Some kind of apology from someone who has taken their labor, taken the goods that they produced, and then refused to pay them. I can only say that I'm certainly relieved that my late father never did business with you. He provided.
You know what would be, I think, genius? She's like, don't they deserve some type of apology? If Donald Trump actually says, okay, I will make a sincere apology. Over the years, I'm a strict business person. My job is to run a business, and business is tough, right? But I understand people have their own livelihoods. They have their, and I was being too efficient with business, and to that I sincerely apologize. Like if you can show sincerity on that, I think that will. A lot of people are like, whoa, look at him. He has such a, I don't know, open heart in terms of admitting his mistakes. He's willing to admit his mistakes and then apologize for it because people don't expect him to do that right now, right? And just bring that forward. And it's just like, but when I become president, my job is not make a profitable company. My job is to make a nation of happy people, and that's what I will take care of. I use all my power and might. The same thing that you feel like it was not used for you, I will use that to help your benefit, make you great again, make the country great. I think that if they takes it back to that big emotional epic meaning statement, I think it's going to benefit him a lot.
Provided a good middle class life for us, but the people he worked for, he expected the bargain to be kept on both sides. And when we talk about your business, you've taken business bankruptcy 6 times. There are a lot of great business people that have never taken bankruptcy once. You call yourself the king of debt. You talk about leverage. You even at one time suggested that you would try to negotiate down the national debt of the United States. Well, sometimes there's not a direct transfer of skills from business to government, but sometimes what happened in business would be really bad for government.
Let's let Mr.
And
Trump.
we need to be very clear about that.
Look, it's all words. It's all sound bites.
Uh-huh.
He built an unbelievable company.
He did that again.
Some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world, real estate assets anywhere in the world, beyond the United States, in Europe, lots of different places. It's an unbelievable company.
He must have paid a lot of other people.
On occasion.
Right? Remember his big point? Like, oh, all these people are spending money elsewhere, building things elsewhere, hiring outside labor. I'm pretty sure he hired outside labor when he built some of the greatest things in the world outside of the United States. Just catch that. Again, there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. But his making that a big argument, like, oh, things are going out of the United States and that's evil and terrible. But he's doing that, so it's normal, in my opinion.
We used certain laws that are there, and when Secretary Clinton talks about people that didn't get paid, first of all, they did get paid a lot, but taking advantage of the laws of the nation. Now, if you want to change the laws, you've been there a long time, change the laws. But I take advantage of the laws of the nation because I'm running a company. My obligation right now is to do well for myself, my family, my employees.
He's doing some of that.
My companies. And that's what I do.
But he's not doing the apologies.
But what she doesn't say is the tens of thousands of people that are unbelievably happy and that love me. I'll give you an example. We're just opening up on Pennsylvania Avenue, right next to the White House. So if I don't get there one way, I'm going to get to Pennsylvania Avenue another. But we're opening the old post office. Under budget, ahead of schedule, saved tremendous money. I'm a year ahead of schedule. And that's what this country should be doing. We build roads and they cost 2 and 3 and 4 times what they're supposed to cost. We buy products for our military and they come in at costs that are so far above what they were supposed to be because we don't have people that know what they're doing. When we look at the budget is bad to a large extent because we have people that have no idea as to what to do and how to buy. The Trump International is way under budget and way ahead of schedule, and we should be able to do that for our country.
Well, we're well behind schedule, so I want to move.
Just a quick thing. I think Donald Trump has a strong advantage because he can just keep attacking, right? Because he just says, look, status quo is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Terrible leaders, terrible leaders, terrible leaders. And it's all because of Clinton, right? So he doesn't have to defend anything. He doesn't have to offer solutions. Clinton has to say, oh, I did this. There's this policy. This is how I'm going to solve the problem. This is how it's been. But he just said, look, things are terrible. Things are terrible. We need new leadership, right? He doesn't really, I think, specifically address how he's going to solve it, how he's going to make these things better. But he's in a better position just because he can just attack. He can just say, things are bad, therefore you need someone new like me. And I'm smart. I've done good business, right? Whereas, you know, I know as a fact it's much harder to run a country or even like a city, right? Or, you know, than a company. So.
To our next segment. We move into our next segment talking about America's direction, and let's start by talking about race. The share of Americans who say race relations are bad in this country is the highest it's been in decades. Much of it amplified by shootings of African Americans by police, as we've seen recently in Charlotte and Tulsa. Race has been a big issue in this campaign, and one of you is going to have to bridge a very wide and bitter gap. So how do you heal the divide? Secretary Clinton, you get 2 minutes on this.
Well, you're right. Race remains a significant challenge in our country. Unfortunately, race still determines too much. Often determines where people live, determines what kind of education in their public schools they can get, and yes, it determines how they're treated in the criminal justice system. We've just seen those two tragic examples in both Tulsa and Charlotte.
It's just stalling, I think.
And we've got to do several things at the same time. We have to restore trust between communities and the police. We have to work to make sure that our police are using the best training, the best techniques.
Okay, so those are empty
that
answers
they're well
for now.
prepared to use force
We need to build
only
trust.
when necessary.
Like
Everyone should be respected by the law, and everyone should respect the
she's
law.
totally unprepared to answer
Right
this
now,
question.
that's not the case in a lot of our neighborhoods.
Oh, because that's Hilary Clinton's
So
fault.
I have, ever since the first day of my campaign, called for criminal justice reform. I've laid out a platform
She should start
that
with this.
I think would begin
Totally.
to remedy some of the problems we have in the criminal justice system. But we also have to recognize, in addition to the challenges that we face with policing, there are so many good, brave police officers who equally want reform. So we have to bring communities together in order to begin working on that as a mutual goal. And we've got to get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. The gun epidemic is the leading cause of death of young African American men, more than the next 9 causes put together. So we have to do 2 things, as I said. We have to restore trust, we have to work with the police, we have to make sure they respect the communities and the communities respect them, and we have to tackle the plague
And you
of
have
gun
to solve
violence, which is a
racism.
big contributor to
Yeah,
a lot
there's
of the
no-
problems
there's
that
no-
we're seeing today.
All right, Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes. How do you
Straightforward
heal the divide?
response.
First of all, Secretary Clinton doesn't want to use a couple of words, and that's law and order. We need law and order. If we don't have it, we're not going to have a country. And when I look at what's going on in Charlotte, a city I love, a city where I have investments, when I look at what's going on throughout various parts of our country, whether it's, I mean, I can just keep naming them all day long. We need law and order in our country. And I just got today, as you know, the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. We just came in. We have endorsements from, I think, almost every police group, a large percentage of them in the United States. We have a situation where we have our inner cities, African Americans, Hispanics, are living in hell because it's so dangerous. You walk down the street, you get shot. In Chicago, they've had thousands of shootings, thousands, since January 1st. Thousands of shootings. And I'm saying, where is this? Is this a war-torn country? What are we doing? And we have to stop the violence. We have to bring back law and order. In a place like Chicago, where thousands of people have been killed, thousands over the last number of years. In fact, almost 4,000 have been killed since Barack Obama became president.
See, his strategy is kind of smart, because Hillary's saying, hey, we need to do the police stuff. We need to honor the brave policemen and, you know, understand each other. His saying, like, oh, those minorities, I don't know if they're minority, but those I'm going to call them minorities, they're living in hell. They're all these shootings, terrible, terrible. And then so those people say, yeah, he understands what I'm going through. He understands my life, right? And they're more emotionally driven to support him. Whereas Hillary's like, oh, everyone should just be friends, you know, on the police. And these people's like, my life is hell. These cops are the evil ones, and you're telling me that we need to honor those people, you know. So I think his strategy is a little bit more tactful.
Almost 4,000 people in Chicago have been killed. We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing. Right now, our police, in many cases, are afraid to do anything. We have to protect our inner cities because African-American communities are being decimated by crime.
Your 2 minutes expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out Black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our mayor, our new mayor, refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profile.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them. These are felons. These are people that are bad people that shouldn't be. When you have 3,000 shootings in Chicago from January 1st, when you have 4,000 people killed in Chicago by guns from the beginning of the presidency of Barack Obama, his hometown, you have to have stop and frisk. You need more police. You need a better community relation. You don't have good community relations in Chicago. It's terrible. I have property there. It's terrible what's going on in Chicago. But when you look at
now, he's doing a bad thing because he just says, is that racial profiling? And then he says, no, these are bad people, right? And it almost sounds like, perceptionally, it feels like, one, the Black and Hispanics, they are bad people. You can't give them the guns. You need to take the guns away from these people. And then in plus, like, you need to, well, of course, the white people can still have the guns because they're the good guys, right? So I think that just emotional association is a very bad thing of Donald Trump. And then the next thing is like, oh, we need more police to crush down, you know, these things. And again, I'm not talking about the correctness of policy. I'm just saying what is saying at this moment is not, I don't think it's very good for the debate. Oops.
Better relationships. I agree with Secretary Clinton on this. You need better relationships between the communities and the police because in some cases it's not good. But you look at Dallas where the relationships were really studied. The relationships were really a beautiful thing. And then 5 police officers were killed one night very violently. So there's some bad things going on, some really bad things.
Secretary Clinton,
but we need, Lester, we need law and order. We need law and order in the inner cities because the people that are most affected by what's happening are African American and Hispanic people. And it's very unfair to them what our politicians are allowing to happen.
Secretary Clinton.
Yeah, he should actually do that. It's like, well, it's the Hispanic and the African Americans that are getting shot. They're getting hurt. They're getting, so this law and order protects them tremendously. He has to really bring it back to that. But I think his ending did do a little bit of a better job in from a weak start.
Well, I've heard Donald say this at his rallies, and it's really unfortunate that he paints such a dire negative picture of black communities in our country. You know, the vibrancy of the black church, the black businesses that employ so many people, the opportunities that so many families are working to provide for their kids. There's a lot that we should be proud of and we should be supporting and lifting up. But we do always have to make sure we keep people safe. There are the right ways of doing it, and then there are ways that are ineffective. Stop and frisk was found to be unconstitutional. And in part,
you know what's crazy? The people who voted for Donald Trump, I'm not going to say it, a lot of them. A group of the people who support Donald Trump, they don't care as much about things being constitutional, equal rights. They're more about, what do I get? I mean, it just sounds all like mumble jumbo. Of course, when it comes to their right, it's important they should have their guns and whatnot. But I think when he says, well, this thing that you support, that let's say you're prejudiced against some minority groups and we have a law that says we will kick them out of the country, like, I don't think they really care about this constitutional stuff. Again, you got to focus on the heart, not the brain on some of this stuff.
Because it was ineffective.
And just keep in mind, again, people who vote for Trump, they vote for it, they support him emotionally. People who vote for Hillary are the logical people that have enough emotion to push for her. But there's so many people in the middle who kind of feel like Hillary's probably doing better, like probably knows what she's doing more. They don't like Trump at all. But they're just like, I'm not gonna vote because I don't like these politicians. I don't like any of them. I'm not gonna vote, right? And so she really needs to emotionally drive the people in the middle to vote and saying, oh well, Donald Trump's not constitutional. Doesn't help. I don't think she should focus on getting the Trump supporters to support her. She should get all the people who think she's probably a little better to actually go out and vote for her. I think that's her goal.
Not do what it needed to do. Now, I believe in community policing, and in fact, violent crime is 1/2 of what it was in 1991. Property crime is down 40%. We just don't want to see it creep back up. We've had 25 years of very good cooperation, but there were some problems, some unintended consequences. Too many young African American and Latino men ended up in jail for nonviolent offenses, and it's just a fact that if you're a young African American man and you do the same thing as a young white man, you are more likely to be arrested, charged, convicted, and incarcerated. So we've got to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. We cannot just say law and order. We have to say, we have to come forward with a plan that is going to divert people from the criminal justice system, deal with mandatory minimum sentences, which have put too many people away for too long for doing too little. We need to have more second chance programs. I'm glad that we're ending private prisons in the federal system. I want to see them ended in the state system. You shouldn't have a profit motivation to fill prison cells with young Americans. So there are some positive ways we could work on this. And I believe strongly that common sense gun safety measures would assist us right now. And this is something Donald has supported along with the gun lobby. Right now, we've got too many military-style weapons on the streets. In a lot of places, our police are outgunned. We need comprehensive background checks, and we need to keep guns out of the hands of those who will do harm. And we finally need to pass a prohibition on anyone who's on the terrorist watch list from being able to buy a gun in our country. If you're too dangerous to fly, you are too dangerous to buy a gun. So there are things we can do, and we ought to do it in a bipartisan way.
Secretary Clinton, last week you said we've got to do everything possible to improve policing to go right at implicit bias. Do you believe that police are implicitly biased against black people?
Lester, I think implicit bias is a problem for everyone, not just police. I think, unfortunately, too many of us in our great country jump to conclusions about each other. And therefore, I think we need all of us to be asking hard questions about, you know, why am I feeling this way? But when it comes to policing, since it can have literally fatal consequences, I have said in my first budget we would put money into that budget to help us deal with implicit bias by retraining a lot of our police officers. I met with a group of very distinguished, experienced police chiefs a few weeks ago. They admit it's an issue. They've got a lot of concerns. Mental health is one of the biggest concerns because now police are having to handle a lot of really difficult mental health problems on the street. They want support. They want more training. They want more assistance. And I think the federal government could be in a position where we would offer and provide that.
That's actually a pretty strong response because that is almost like a trick question. Like that's a question you can't win on, right? Well, are you saying there's a lot of racism? Do people think about racism, right? And then she's like, well, we all do. And it's just more, I think her response was pretty good. You can't really gain from that question, but I don't think she lost a lot of respect and credit from that.
I'd like to respond.
Please.
First of all, I agree, and a lot of people, even within my own party, want to give certain rights to people on watch lists and no-fly lists. I agree with you. When a person is on a watch list or a no-fly list, and I have the endorsement of the NRA, which I'm very proud of, these are very, very good people, and they're protecting the Second Amendment. But I think we have to look very strongly at no-fly lists and watch lists, and when people are on there, even if they shouldn't be on there, we'll help them legally, we'll help them get off. But I tend to agree with that quite strongly. I do want to bring up the fact that you were the one that brought up the word super predator about young black youth. And that's a term that I think was it's been horribly met, as you know. I think you've apologized for it. But I think it was a terrible thing to say. And when it comes to stop and frisk, you know, you're talking about taking guns away. Well, I'm talking about taking guns away from gangs and people that use them. And I really don't think you disagree with me on this, if you want to know the truth. I think maybe there's a political reason why you can't say it, but I really don't believe. In New York City, stop and frisk, we had 2,200 murders, and stop and frisk brought it down to 500 murders. 500 murders is a lot of murders. Hard to believe 500 is like supposed to be good. But we went from 2,200 to 500, and it was continued on by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was terminated by current mayor. But stop and frisk had a tremendous impact on the safety of New York City, tremendous beyond belief. So when you say it has no impact, it really did. It had a very, very big impact.
Well, it's also...
That was actually really strong. Like that moment, he sounded very intelligent. He sounded not just intelligent, but not crushing, agreeable. It's like, oh, I agree with this, but here's intelligent information about you that would put myself in a better advantage. I thought that was very skillful of Donald Trump.
Fair to say, if we're going to talk about mayors, that under the current mayor, crime has continued to drop, including murders. So there
you're
is...
Wrong. You're wrong.
No, I'm not.
Murders are up. All right, you check.
New York has done an excellent job, and I give credit. I give credit across the board, going back to mayors, to police chiefs, because it has worked, and other communities need to come together to do what will work as well. Look, one murder is too many, but it is important that we learn about what has been effective and not go to things that sound good that really did not have the kind of impact that we would want. Who disagrees with keeping neighborhoods safe? But let's also add, no one should disagree about respecting the rights of young men who live in those neighborhoods. And so we need to do a better job of working again with the communities, faith communities, business communities, as well as the police.
I think right now they're agreeing and they're just saying things that sound good.
About race, and so Mr. Trump, I have to ask you.
But I'd like to just respond, if I might.
Please, 20 seconds.
I'd just like to respond.
Please respond, then I've got to
I
follow
will.
up.
Look, the African-American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years. The African-American community, look, the community within the inner cities has been so badly treated. They've been abused and used in order to get votes by Democrat politicians, because that's what it is. They've controlled these communities for up to 100 years.
Mr. Trump,
unbroken. And I will tell you, you look at the inner cities, and I just left Detroit, and I just left Philadelphia, and I just, you know, you've seen me, I've been all over the place. You decided to stay home, and that's okay. But I will tell you, I've been all over, and I've met some of the greatest people I'll ever meet.
That's a sneaky
within
tactic.
these communities, and they are very, very upset with what their politicians have told them and what their politicians have done.
I think Donald just criticized me for preparing for this debate. And yes, I did. And you know what else I prepared for? I prepared to be president. And I think that's a good thing.
See, that's one of those short one-liners, like smile like, haha, I'm just better than you. And here it is. Quiet, no more explaining. That was what works in this type of debate, in my opinion. At least against Donald Trump.
Years, you perpetuated a false claim that the nation's first black president was not a natural-born citizen. You questioned his legitimacy. In the last couple of weeks, you acknowledge what most Americans have accepted for years. The president was born in the United States. Can you tell us what took you so...
I'll tell you very, well, just very...
It's Hillary's campaign's fault.
Sidney Blumenthal works for the campaign and very close friend of Secretary Clinton. And her campaign manager, Patty Doyle, went to, during the campaign, her campaign against President Obama, fought very hard. And you can go look it up and you can check it out. And if you look at CNN this past week, Patty Solis Doyle was on Wolf Blitzer saying that this happened. Blumenthal sent McClatchy, highly respected reporter at McClatchy, to Kenya to find out about it. They were pressing it very hard. She failed to get the birth certificate. When I got involved, I didn't fail. I got him to give the birth certificate. So I'm satisfied with it, and I'll tell you why I'm satisfied with it. Because I want to get on to defeating ISIS. Because I want to get on to creating jobs. Because I want to get on to having a strong border. Because I want to get on to things that are very important to me and that are very important to the country.
I'll let you respond. That's important, but I just want to get the answer here. The birth certificate was produced in 2011. You continued to tell the story and question the president's legitimacy in 2012, 13, 14, 15,
yeah,
as recently as January. So the question is, what changed your mind?
Well, nobody was pressing it. Nobody was caring much about it. I figured you'd ask the question tonight, of course, but nobody was caring much about it. But I was the one that got him to produce the birth certificate, and I think I did a good job.
And then you didn't believe in it, though.
Secretary Clinton also fought it. I mean, you know, now everybody in mainstream is going to say, oh, that's not true. Look, it's true. Sidney Blumenthal sent the reporter. You just have to take a look at CNN the last week, the interview with your former campaign manager, and she was involved. But just like she can't bring back jobs, she can't produce.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to follow that. I will let you respond to that because there's a lot there, but we're talking about racial healing in this segment. What do you say to Americans?
Well, it was very, I say nothing because I was able to get him to produce it. He should have produced it a long time before. I say nothing. But let me just tell you, when you talk about healing, I think that I've developed very, very good relationships over the last little while with the African American community. I think you can see that. And
you can see that.
I feel that they really wanted me to come to that conclusion, and I think I did a great job and a great service, not only for the country, but even for the president, in getting him to produce his birth certificate.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, just listen to what you heard. And clearly, as Donald just admitted, he knew he was going to stand on this debate stage and Lester Holt was going to be asking us questions, so he tried to put the whole racist birther lie to bed. But it can't be dismissed that easily. He has really started his political activity based on this racist lie that our first black president was not an American citizen. There was absolutely no evidence for it, but he persisted. He persisted year after year because some of his supporters, people that he was trying to bring into his fold, apparently believed it or wanted to believe it. But remember, Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination.
Ooh,
because he would not rent apartments in one of his developments to African Americans, and he made sure that the people who worked for him understood that was the policy. He actually was sued twice by the Justice Department. So he has
That's
a
strong.
long record of engaging in racist behavior. And the
That's
birther
how he made
lie
the billions. He's going to
was
make
a very
the
hurtful
U.S.
one.
the
You know,
same.
Barack Obama is a man of great dignity, and I could tell how much it bothered him and annoyed him that this was being touted and used against him. But I like to remember what Michelle Obama said in her amazing speech at our Democratic National Convention. When they go low, we go high. And Barack Obama went high, despite Donald Trump's best efforts to bring him down.
Mr. Trump, you can respond, and we're going to move on
I
to
would
the next
love to
segment.
respond. First of all, I got to watch, in preparing for this, some of your debates against Barack Obama. You treated him with terrible disrespect. And I watched the way you talk now about how lovely everything is and how wonderful you are. It doesn't work that way. You were after him. You were trying to. You even sent
And he's
out,
black,
or
so
your
he must be
campaign sent out
racist.
pictures of him in a certain garb, very famous pictures. I don't think you can deny that. But just last week, your campaign manager said it was true. So when you try to act holier than thou, it really doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, as far as the lawsuit, yes, when I was very young, I went into my father's company, had a real estate company in Brooklyn and Queens, and we, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, it was a federal lawsuit, were sued. We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do, but they sued many people. I notice you bring that up a lot, and you know, I also noticed the very nasty commercials that you do on me in so many different ways, which I don't do on you. Maybe I'm trying to save the money, but
She's he's doing another you go low, I go high thing right now. Actually, if you can read that.
frankly, I look at that and I say, isn't that amazing? Because I settled that lawsuit with no admission of guilt. But that was a lawsuit brought against many real estate firms, and it's just one of those things. I'll go on one step further. In Palm Beach, Florida, tough community, a brilliant community, a wealthy community, probably the wealthiest community there is in the world.
what he
I
always
opened a
says.
club and really got great credit for it. No discrimination against African Americans, against Muslims, against anybody. And it's a tremendously successful club, and I'm so glad I did it. And I have been given great credit for what I did, and I'm very, very proud
If
of
they
it.
have money,
And that's
doesn't
the way I
matter.
feel. That is the true way I feel.
Our next segment is called Securing America.
think
We
that's
want
the
to
last
start
one.
with a 21st
Sorry, we're a little
century
bit over-
war happening
quite a bit over
every
time.
day in this country. Our
Especially with
institutions
my
are under
pauses.
cyber attack, and our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it, and how do we
This
fight
one
it?
probably
Secretary
Donald Trump would do
this answer
better.
goes to you.
He just says, crush the enemy, and that
Well,
helps.
I think cybersecurity, cyber warfare will be one of the biggest challenges facing the next president, because clearly we're facing at this point two different kinds of adversaries. There are the independent hacking groups that do it mostly for commercial reasons, to try to steal information that they then can
There's
use
the
to make
hobby
money.
groups too,
But
just for fun.
increasingly, we are seeing cyber attacks coming from states, organs of states. The most recent and troubling of these has been Russia. There's no doubt now that Russia has used cyber attacks against all kinds of organizations in our country, and I am deeply concerned about this. I know Donald's very praiseworthy of Vladimir Putin, but Putin is playing a really tough, long game here. And one of the things he's done is to let loose cyber attackers to hack into government files, to hack into personal files, hack into the Democratic National Committee. And we recently have learned that, you know, that this is one of their preferred methods of trying to wreak havoc and collect information. We need to make it very clear, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else, the United States has much greater capacity, and we are not going to sit idly by and permit state actors to go after our information, our private sector information or our public sector information. And we're going to have to make it clear that we don't want to use the kinds of tools that we have. We don't want to engage in a different kind of warfare. but we will defend the citizens of this country. And the Russians need to understand that. I think they've been treating it as almost a probing. How far would we go? How much would we do? And that's why I was so shocked when Donald publicly invited Putin to hack into Americans. That is just unacceptable. It's one of the reasons why 50 national security officials who served in Republican administration have said that Donald is unfit to be the commander-in-chief. It's comments like that that really worry people who understand.
I think what she could also say, of course she didn't have time, but also say that, well, you know, behind my back there's all these internet celebrities. Elon Musk, you know, will help on this, you know, make sure we have a celebrity. Mark Zuckerberg, and again, maybe like they can't do much with security, but I think for the public, I was like, oh yes, this tech genius guys behind your back, they know about security, and it sounds like a really good actionable plan. I think that will actually help their campaign in general. But you know, I thought a response was fine.
And the threats that we face.
Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes in the same question. Who's behind it?
I do want to say that I was just endorsed, and more are coming next week. It'll be over 200 admirals, many of them are here.
He likes to talk about how he's endorsed all the time.
Endorsed me to lead this country. That just happened, and many more are coming, and I'm very proud of it. In addition, I was just endorsed by ICE. They've never endorsed anybody before on immigration. I was just endorsed by ICE. I was just recently endorsed 16,500 Border Patrol agents. So when Secretary Clinton talks about this, I mean, I'll take the admirals and I'll take the generals any day over the political hacks that I see that have led our country so brilliantly over the last 10 years with their knowledge, okay? Because look at the mess that we're in. Look at the mess that we're in. As far as the cyber, I agree to parts of what Secretary Clinton said. We should be better than anybody else, and perhaps we're not. I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, 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 but maybe it was. I mean, it could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay? You don't know who broke into DNC, but what did we learn with DNC? We learned that Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of by your people, by Deb Wasserman Schultz. Look what happened to her. But Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of. That's what we learned. Now, whether that was Russia, whether that was China, whether it was another country, we don't know. Because the truth is, under President Obama, we've lost control of things that we used to have control over. We came in
like
with
the internet.
We came up with the internet, and I think Secretary Clinton and myself would agree very much. When you look at what ISIS is doing with the internet, they're beating us at our own game, ISIS. So we have to get very, very tough on cyber and cyber warfare.
To shut down part of the internet.
It is a huge problem. I have a son. He's 10 years old. He has computers. He is so good with these computers. It's unbelievable. The security aspect of cyber is very, very tough, and maybe it's hardly doable. But I will say we are not doing the job we should be doing. But that's true throughout our whole governmental society. We have so many things that we have to do better, Lester, and certainly cyber is one of them.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think there are a number of issues that we should be addressing. I have put forth a plan to defeat ISIS. It does involve going after them online. I think we need to do much more with our tech companies to prevent ISIS and their operatives from being able to use the internet to radicalize, even direct people in our country and Europe and elsewhere. But we also have to intensify our air strikes against ISIS and eventually support our Arab and Kurdish partners to be able to actually take out ISIS in Raqqa and their claim of being a caliphate. We're making progress. Our military is assisting in Iraq, and we're hoping that within the year we'll be able to push ISIS out of Iraq and then, you know, really squeeze them in Syria. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that they've had foreign fighters coming to volunteer for them, foreign money, foreign weapons. So we have to make this the top priority, and I would also do everything possible to take out their leadership. I was involved in
I think she said
a
too
number
much.
of
I think
efforts
she's,
to
I
take
have a
out
plan, this is
al-Qaeda
the plan.
leadership when I
It's
was
probably good.
Secretary
I
of
think
State,
she's using
including,
too
of
many
course,
words again.
taking out bin Laden. And I think we need to go after Baghdadi as well, make that one of our organizing principles, because we've got to defeat ISIS and we've got to do everything we can to disrupt their
I helped, my
efforts
leadership
online.
helped take
You
out bin
mentioned
Laden,
ISIS,
so
and we think of
I can
ISIS
help take out
certainly
ISIS.
as over there, but there are
That's
American
compelling.
citizens who have been inspired to commit acts of terror on American soil. The latest incident, of course, of bombings we just saw in New York and New Jersey, the knife attack at a mall in Minnesota, and the last year, deadly attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando. I'll ask this to both of you. Tell us specifically how you would prevent homegrown attacks by American citizens, Mr. Trump.
Well, first I have to say one thing, very important. Secretary Clinton is talking about taking out ISIS. We will take out ISIS. Well, President Obama and Secretary Clinton created a vacuum the way they got out of Iraq. Because they got out, they shouldn't have been in, but once they got in, the way they got out was a disaster. And ISIS was formed. So she talks about taking them out. She's been doing it a long time. She's been trying to take them out for a long time. But they wouldn't have even been formed if they left some troops behind, like 10,000 or maybe something more than that. And then you wouldn't have had them. Or, as I've been saying for a long time, and I think you'll agree because I said it to you once, had we taken the oil, and we should have taken the oil, ISIS would not have been able to form either because the oil was their primary source of income. And now they have the oil all over the place, including the oil, a lot of the oil in Libya, which was another one of her disasters.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I hope the fact checkers are turning up the volume and really working hard. Donald supported the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
He actually advocated for the actions we took in Libya and urged that Gaddafi be taken out after actually doing some business with him one time. But the larger point, he says this constantly, is George W. Bush made the agreement about when American troops would leave Iraq, not Barack Obama. And the only way that American troops could have stayed in Iraq is to get an agreement from the then Iraqi government that would have protected our troops. And the Iraqi government would not give that. But let's talk about the question you asked.
She needs to bring it back to, since you've never run office as a politician before, you have no idea about these complications. Your thoughts are so simple, but your thoughts would die instantly in a multi-nation, politics environment. I think she needs to bring it back to his credibility and credentials.
Lester, the question you asked is, what do we do here in the United States? That's the most important part of this. How do we prevent attacks? How do we protect our people? And I think we've got to have an intelligence surge where we are looking for every scrap of information. I was so proud of law enforcement in New York, in Minnesota, in New Jersey. They responded so quickly, so professionally to the attacks that occurred by Rahami, and they brought him down. And we may find out more information because he is still alive, which may prove to be an intelligence benefit. So we've got to do everything we can to vacuum up intelligence from Europe, from the Middle East. That means we've got to work more closely with our allies. And that's something that Donald has been very dismissive of. We're working with NATO, the longest military alliance in the history of the world, to really turn our attention to terrorism. We're working with our friends in the Middle East, many of which, as you know, are Muslim majority nations. Donald has consistently insulted Muslims abroad, Muslims at home, when we need to be cooperating with Muslim nations and with the American Muslim community. They're on the front lines. They can provide information to us that we might not get anywhere else. They need to have close working cooperation with law enforcement in these communities, not be alienated and pushed away, as some of Donald's rhetoric, unfortunately, has led to.
Mr.
Well, I'd have to respond.
Please respond.
The Secretary said very strongly about working with. We've been working with them for many years. And we have the greatest mess anyone's ever seen. You look at the Middle East, it's a total mess. Under your direction to a large extent. But you look at the Middle East. You started the Iran deal. That's another beauty, where you have a country that was ready to fall. I mean, they were doing so badly. They were choking on the sanctions, and now they're going to be actually probably a major power at some point pretty soon, the way they're going. But when you look at NATO, I was asked on a major show, what do you think of NATO? And you have to understand, I'm a business person. I did really well, but I have common sense. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I haven't given lots of thought to NATO, but two things. Number one, the 28 countries of NATO, many of them aren't paying their fair share. Number two, and that bothers me because we should be, yes, we're defending them, and they should at least be paying us what they're supposed to be paying by treaty and contract. And number two, I said, and very strongly, NATO could be obsolete because, and I was very strong on this, and it was actually covered very accurately in the New York Times, which is unusual for the New York Times, to be honest. But I said, they do not focus on terror. And I was very strong, and I said it numerous times. And about 4 months ago, I read on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that NATO is opening up a major terror division. And I think that's great. And I think we should get, because we pay approximately 73% of the cost of NATO. It's a lot of money to protect other people. But I'm all for NATO. But I said they have to focus on terror also. And they're going to do that. And that was, believe me, I'm sure I'm not going to get credit for it, but that was largely because of what I was saying and my criticism of NATO. I think we have to get NATO to go into the Middle East with us, in addition to surrounding nations, and we have to knock the hell out of ISIS, and we have to do it fast. When ISIS formed in this vacuum created by Barack Obama and Secretary Clinton, and believe me, you were the ones that took out the troops. Not only that, you named the day. They couldn't believe it. They sat back probably and said, I can't believe it. They said, no, wait a minute.
We've covered
when they formed, this is something that never should have happened. It should have never happened. Now, you're talking about taking out ISIS, but you were there and you were Secretary of State when it was a little infant. Now it's in over 30 countries. And you're going to stop them? I don't think so.
Mr. Trump, a lot of these are judgment questions. You had supported the war in Iraq before the invasion. What makes your judgment?
I did not support the war in Iraq.
2002.
That is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her, because she, frankly, I think the best person in her campaign is mainstream media.
My question is, since
would you like to hear?
Why is your
the war. Wait a minute. I was against the war in Iraq, just so you put it out.
The record shows otherwise.
The record does not show that.
Why is your judgment?
The record shows that I'm right. When I did an interview with Howard Stern, very lightly, first time anyone's asked me that, I said, very lightly, I don't know, maybe, who knows, essentially. I then did an interview with Neil Cavuto. We talked about the economy is more important. I then spoke to Sean Hannity, which everybody refuses to call Sean Hannity. I had numerous conversations with Sean Hannity at Fox, and Sean Hannity said, and he called me the other day, and I spoke to him about it. He said, you were totally against war, because he was for the war.
Why is your judgment better than...
And that was before the war started. Sean Hannity said very strongly...
One of his issues is he says a lot of things that contradict each other, so he can probably recite, both sides can recite his quotes that help his statements.
And I understand that side also, not very much, because we should have never been there. But nobody called Sean Hannity. And then they did an article in a major magazine shortly after the war started, I think in 2004, but they did an article which had me totally against the war in Iraq. And one of your compatriots said, you know, whether it was before or right after, Trump was definitely, because if you read this article, there's no doubt. But if somebody, and I'll ask the press, if somebody would call up Sean Hannity, this was before the war started, he and I used to have arguments about the war. I said it's a terrible and a stupid thing. It's going to destabilize the Middle East, and that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is your judgment any different than Mrs. Clinton?
Well, I have much better judgment than she does. There's no question about that. I also have a much better temperament than she has. You know, I have a much better... She spent, let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an advertising. You know, they get Madison Avenue into a room, they put name, temperament. Let's go after. I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not have. Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day behind the blue screen. I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you was totally out of control.
You was
I said,
out of
there's
control.
a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Woo, okay. Let's talk about two important issues that were briefly mentioned by Donald. First, NATO. You know, NATO as a military alliance has something called Article 5, and basically it says this: an attack on one is an attack on all. And do you know the only time it's ever been invoked? After 9/11, when the 28 nations of NATO said that they would go to Afghanistan with us to fight terrorism, something that they still are doing by our side. With respect to Iran, when I became Secretary of State, Iran was weeks away from having enough nuclear material to form a bomb. They had mastered the nuclear fuel cycle under the Bush administration. They had built covert facilities. They had stocked them with centrifuges that were whirling away. And we had sanctioned them. I voted for every sanction against Iran when I was in the Senate, but it wasn't enough. So I spent a year and a half putting together a coalition that included Russia and China to impose the toughest sanctions on Iran.
I'm tough.
And we did drive them to the negotiating table. And my successor, John Kerry, and President Obama got a deal that put a lid on Iran's nuclear program without firing a single shot. That's diplomacy. That's coalition building. That's working with other nations. The other day, I saw Donald saying that there were some Iranian sailors on a ship in the waters off of Iran, and they were taunting American sailors who were on a nearby ship. He said, you know, if they taunted our sailors, I'd blow them out of the water and start another war. That's not good judgment. That is not the right temperament to be commander-in-chief, to be taunted. And the worst part of what we've heard Donald say has been about nuclear weapons. He has said repeatedly that he didn't care if other nations got nuclear weapons, Japan, South Korea, even Saudi Arabia. It has been the policy of the United States, Democrats and Republicans, to do everything we could to reduce the proliferation of nuclear weapons. He even said, well, you know, if there were a nuclear war in East Asia, well, you know, that's fine. You know, have a good time, folks. And in fact, his cavalier attitude about nuclear weapons is so deeply troubling. That is the #1 threat we face in the world, and it becomes particularly threatening if terrorists ever get their hands on any nuclear material.
That is true.
So a man who can be provoked by a tweet should not have his fingers anywhere near the nuclear codes, as far as I think
that is very true.
Any sense about this should be concerned.
That line's getting a little bit old, I must say. Listen,
it's a good one, though.
I would like to,
well describes the problem.
It's not an accurate one at all. It's not an accurate one. So I just want to give a lot of things and just to respond. I agree with her on one thing. The single greatest problem the world has is nuclear armament, nuclear weapons. Not global warming like you think and your president thinks. Nuclear is the single greatest threat. Just to go down the list, we defend Japan, we defend Germany, we defend South Korea, we defend Saudi Arabia, we defend countries. They do not pay us what they should be paying us because we are providing tremendous service and we're losing a fortune. That's why we're losing. We lose on everything. I say, who makes these? We lose on everything. Well, I said that it's very possible that if they don't pay a fair share, because this isn't 40 years ago where we could do what we're doing. We can't defend Japan, a behemoth, selling us cars by the million.
We need to move on.
Wait, but it's very important. All I said
that was a powerful assertive voice. We need to move on.
Help us out. We're a country that owes $20 trillion. They have to help us out. As far as the nuclear is concerned, I agree. It is the single greatest threat that this country has.
Which leads my next question as we enter our last segment here still on the subject of securing America. On nuclear weapons, President Obama reportedly considered changing the nation's long-standing policy on first use. Do you support the current policy? Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes on that.
Well, I have to say that, you know, for what Secretary Clinton was saying about nuclear with Russia. She's very cavalier in the way she talks about various countries. But Russia's been expanding. They have a much newer capability than we do. We have not been updating from the new standpoint. I looked the other night, I was seeing B-52s. They're old enough that your father, your grandfather could be flying them. We are not keeping up with other countries. I would like everybody to end it, just get rid of it, but I would certainly not do first strike. I think that once the nuclear alternative happens, it's over. At the same time, we have to be prepared. I can't take anything off the table, because you look at some of these countries, you look at North Korea, we're doing nothing there. China should solve that problem for us. China should go into North Korea. China is totally powerful as it relates to North Korea. And by the way, another one powerful is the worst deal I think I've ever seen negotiated that you started is the Iran deal. Iran is one of their biggest trading partners. Iran has power over North Korea. And when they made that horrible deal with Iran, they should have included the fact that they do something with respect to North Korea. And they should have done something with respect to Yemen and all these other places. And when asked to Secretary Kerry, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you add other things into the deal? One of the great giveaways of all time, including $400 million in cash. Nobody's ever seen that before. That turned out to be wrong. It was actually $1.7 billion in cash. Obviously, I guess, for the hostages, it certainly looks that way. So you say to yourself,
that's like twice your income for 1 year.
Make the right deal? This is one of the worst deals ever made by any country in history. The deal with Iran will lead to nuclear problems. All they have to do is sit back 10 years, and they don't have to do much, and they're going to end up getting nuclear. I met with Bibi Netanyahu the other day. Believe me, he is not a happy camper.
All right. Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, you have 2 minutes.
Let me start by saying words matter. Words matter when you run for president, and they really matter when you are president. And I want to reassure our allies in Japan and South Korea and elsewhere that we have mutual defense treaties and we will honor them. It is essential that America's word be good. And so I know that this campaign has caused some questioning and some worries on the part of many leaders across the globe. I've talked with a number of them. But I want to, on behalf of myself, and I think on behalf of a majority of the American people, say that, you know, our word is good. It's also important that we look at the entire global situation. There's no doubt that we have other problems with Iran, but personally I'd rather deal with the other problems having put that lid on their nuclear program than still to be facing that. And Donald never tells you what he would do. Would he have started a war? Would he have bombed Iran? If he's going to criticize a deal that has been very successful in giving us access to Iranian facilities that we never had before, then he should tell us what his alternative would be. But it's like his plan to defeat ISIS. He says it's a secret plan, but the only secret is that he has no plan. So we need to be more
I don't even know that's a secret.
in how we talk about these issues. People around the world follow our
public
presidential
hypothesis.
campaigns so closely, trying to get hints about what we will do. Can they rely on us? Are we going to lead the world with strength and in accordance with our values? That's what I intend to do. I intend to be a leader of our country that people can count on, both here at home and around the world, to make decisions that will further peace and prosperity, but also stand up to bullies, whether they're abroad or at home. We cannot let those who would try to destabilize the world, to interfere with American interests and security, to be given any opportunities at all.
Is expired.
Let's do one thing I'd like to say.
Very quickly.
I will go very quickly, but I will tell you that Hillary will tell you to go to her website and read all about how to defeat ISIS, which she could have defeated by never having it, you know, get going in the first place. Right now, it's getting tougher and tougher to defeat them because they're in more and more places, more and more states, more and more nations.
Mr. Trump.
And it's a big problem. And as far as Japan is concerned, I want to help all of our allies, but we are losing billions and billions of dollars.
Billions?
We cannot
Like I
be
said,
the
billions
policeman of the world. We cannot protect countries all over the world where they're not paying us what we need.
We have just a few final questions.
She doesn't say that because she's got no
there's still
business
a few
ability.
final questions.
We need
Wow.
heart. We need a lot of things, but you have to have some
I'm getting a little tired
basic
already.
ability. And sadly, she doesn't have that. All of the things that she's talking about could have been taken care of during the last 10 years.
I mean,
let's
I
say,
feel like this
while
debate
she
has
had
been a little bit
great power,
monotonous
but
now.
They weren't taken care of.
I feel
And
like
if she ever wins this
it's
race,
reoccurring
they won't
themes,
be
no
taken
From this year,
aha
Secretary
moments
Clinton
anymore.
became the first woman nominated for president by a major party. Earlier this month, you said she doesn't have, quote, a presidential look. She's standing here right now. What did you mean by that?
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina. I said she doesn't have the stamina. And I don't believe she does have the stamina. To be president of this country, you need tremendous stamina.
The quote was,
You
I just
have,
don't think she has
wait a minute, let's
presidential
ask me a
look.
I will say she has a lot of
Can you ask me a
stamina. She's
question?
been pushing this for 30
You have to
years.
be able
Everything she's doing about
to
she had to go
negotiate
through
on trade
the
deals. You
Clinton
have to be
scandals.
able to
She has a
negotiate.
lot of scandals. Like
That's
she
right.
failed and
With
she picked it
Japan,
herself.
With Saudi Arabia.
I think you have
Can you
stamina.
imagine, we're defending Saudi Arabia, and with all of the money they have, we're defending them, and they're not paying. All you have to do is speak to them. Wait,
Huh?
you have so many different things you have to be able to do, and I don't believe that Hillary has the stamina.
Let's let her respond.
Well, as soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, a ceasefire, a release of dissidents, an opening of new opportunities in nations around the world, or even spends 11 hours testifying in front of a congressional committee, he can talk to me about stamina.
The world, let me tell you, Hillary has experience, but it's bad experience. We have made so many bad deals.
I have no
during the
experience,
last-
but it's good
So she's
no
got
experience.
experience, that I agree, but it's bad experience. Whether it's the Iran deal that you're so in love with, where we gave them $150 billion back.
Billion
Whether it's
dollars.
the Iran deal, whether it's anything you can name, you almost can't name a good deal. I agree. She's got experience, but it's bad experience. And this country can't afford to have another 4 years of that kind of experience.
We are at the
Well,
final question.
one thing,
Very
Lester,
quickly, because
is,
we're at the
you
final
know,
question now.
he tried to switch from looks to stamina, but this is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs, and someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers, who has
Never said
said
that.
women don't deserve equal pay unless they do as good a job as
Didn't say.
men. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He loves beauty contests, supporting them and hanging around them. And he called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
her
this?
name
Where
is
did you find
Alicia
this?
Machado.
Where did you find
and
this?
she has become a U.S. citizen, and you can bet
Oh, really?
she's going to vote this November.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump,
Let me
if you
just
take
tell
10 seconds and then
You
we're going to have
know,
the final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous commercials. Some of it said in entertainment. Some of it said somebody who's been very vicious to me, Rosie O'Donnell. I said very tough things to her, and I think everybody would agree that she deserves it, and nobody feels sorry for her. But you want to know the truth? I was going to say something
Please, very quick.
extremely rough to Hillary, to her family, and I said to myself,
So I'm
I
a
can't do
nice
it. I
guy.
just can't do it.
I'm a
It's
moral guy
inappropriate.
because I was gonna
It's
say
not
something
nice.
really mean.
But
I
she
didn't say
spent
it.
hundreds of millions of dollars on negative ads on me, many of which are absolutely untrue. They're untrue and they're misrepresentations. And I will tell you this, Lester, it's not nice, and I don't deserve that. But it's certainly not a nice thing that she's done. It's hundreds of millions of ads, and the only gratifying thing is I saw the polls come in today, and with all of that money,
We
over
have to move on to
$200
the final
million
question.
is spent, and I'm either winning or tied,
One
and
of
I've
you-
spent practically nothing.
One of you will not win this election. So my final question to you tonight, are you willing to accept the outcome as the will of the voters? Secretary Clinton?
Well, I support our democracy. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But I certainly will support the outcome of this election. And I know Donald's trying very hard to plant doubts about it, but I hope the people out there understand this election's really up to you. It's not about us so much as it is about you and your families and the kind of country and future you want. So I sure hope you will get out and vote as though your future depended on it, because I think it does.
Mr. Trump, very quickly, the same question. Will you accept the outcome as the will of the voters?
I want to make America great again. We are a nation that is seriously troubled. We're losing our jobs. People are pouring in to our country. The other day, we were deporting 800 people, and perhaps they passed the wrong button, they pressed the wrong button, or perhaps, worse than that, it was corruption. But these people that we were going to deport for good reason ended up becoming citizens. And it was 800, and now it turns out it might be 1,800, and they don't even know.
Will you accept
Look, here's the story.
election?
Make America great again? I'm going to be able to do it. I don't believe Hillary will. The answer is, if she wins, I will absolutely support her.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. That concludes.
That was actually a very clever response. Like, I'm gonna do it. I'm the best. I can win. I'm awesome. Grr, amazing. Yeah. And yeah, if she was classic answer. Yes, I will support her 100%. Right? It's just like I answered the question that everyone wants me to answer, but then I just said, and he built up that suspense. Like it almost sounded like he was gonna say no. That's actually pretty clever.
Our debate for this evening, a spirited one. We covered a lot of ground. Not everything, as I suspected we wouldn't. The next presidential debates are scheduled for October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis and October 19th at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The conversation will continue. A reminder, the vice presidential debate is scheduled for October 4th.
Oh, there's a vice presidential. I wonder how many people watch that.
My thanks to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump and to Hofstra University.
All right, let me think. I want to stay with for the commentaries afterwards. Should we stay for the commentary afterwards? I do like to kind of see a bit about
debate of this campaign season is
if people are actually watching this.
Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump taking questions for over 90 minutes. It went a little bit long. And we see them now shaking hands with the moderator, Lester Holt, and now we expect them to greet their families as is tradition on these nights.
All right,
Chuck
well,
Todd, I'll turn to you
we'll finish the event.
What did we
finish the
witness
event.
tonight? Do you think either candidate moved the needle in
There's
their
like what?
directions?
Before I want to talk about the candidates, this is the most abnormal event I have ever witnessed. This was not a normal political debate. Let's not sit here and pretend we saw something that is a quadrennial occasion here. This was as surreal as some thought it might be. It was clear both candidates didn't lie to us about how they prepared for this debate. Hillary Clinton was at times even, you could argue, over-prepared, and her opening statement must have had 15 policy proposals within that 2 minutes. And that was Donald Trump, who we've all come to cover on this campaign. That was the same Donald Trump. Very reactive. He was filled with emotion. He had a couple of decent moments at the top.
Decent moments.
But there were times where I didn't understand the point he was making.
This guy's
I have to say,
clearly
this
not
was, I think,
supporting
as
Trump.
this night wore on, became tougher.